This course is presented to you free of charge by TTJ Tech Services of www.ttjtech.biz and by Stir It Up of www.stiritup.com. And remember, stir is spelled with a U, not an I, so that's STURITUP.com. TTJ Tech Services and Stir It Up are pleased to offer this course to you to the glory of God and to the benefit of all those who listen. Well, praise God, and welcome to the Wednesday session, session number 6 of Voiceover In and Out, and this is our very first experience lab. The whole idea behind this is to give you a chance to practice, to try doing the things that we've been teaching. Because as we said before, we can go over step by step, demo after demo, but in the end, you've got to try it for it to really, really sink in. We believe that very strongly. And we've created this experience lab to be somewhat like, to kind of remind you of the labs you used to have in science class, right? You took chemistry, you took physics, and when you take these classes, you have lab time. And the lab time usually starts out with a short explanation of the project and maybe a concept or two that you need in order to complete that project. And then you have some time to try things out. And in a real lab situation in person, when you're working with your chemicals and your Bunsen burner and all these things, there's a little bit of fellowship, a little bit of socialization that's going on, right? You talk to one another, about the last night's game or about what you had for dinner or whatever, and it's very casual, but you're also getting work done. So then you come together and you evaluate, right? You evaluate the project, you evaluate the experiment and the lab and so on. So we're creating as much of that as we possibly reasonably can do that in a Zoom setting, in a remote setting. And so before we start our project today, I want to talk a little bit more about lists in the Contacts app and specifically just going over, I mentioned to you and I showed you briefly the other day that you could create lists in Contacts. And I just want to go a little bit more over that discussion. And that's a great feature. It was really only introduced, I think, in 17. It might have been 16, but I actually think it was last year in 17. And those of us who have been longtime users have really been looking forward to that, because you used to be able to do it on the Mac. But if you were an iPhone or an iPad user only, or primarily, you had to actually go to iCloud.com to create what they used to call groups. But now they've added that feature to the app, praise God. So across the board now, it's lists, and it is based upon the idea that maybe I have family as one list, and I want to be able to, just have a list where I see only their contact cards, or my, maybe my work, or more specifically, maybe we have a group that's 10 people. We're planning a family reunion with these 10 people, or a special project with this handful of people from work, right? Or, a church group, a prayer group, a soccer team, whatever. And so I use it for the TTJ Gold members, those who have paid memberships to our, subscription with training and support and so forth. I have a family one, I have the Gold member one, and a couple others, or at least one other one. And it allows you to see only the contacts that are relevant to that subject. The other thing it allows you to do is immediately send an email to that entire list, to that entire group. And that's a quick and convenient way to send emails to a group of people if you're going to use that group a lot, right? It's a great way to do it. Now, not starting next week on Monday, we're going to learn about the Messages app, and you'll see that it's also possible to have iMessage groups, or really not just iMessage, but messages groups. And those group chats are different from these contacts lists, right? So don't confuse the two. But this is a great way to keep your lists, to keep your contacts organized even further. So when you go back to that lists area, remember that there was an add lists button, and you can create a list, call it family, call it, vacation group, prayer group, whatever, right? And then that list becomes part of your lists. Now, when you want to add a contact to that list, you open well, first of all, you can do this during the creation process of a contact card, right? So when I'm adding Sarah to my contacts, I'm putting in her information. I can immediately add her to a list right then and there. But what if she sends me her contact card, or, she's already in my contacts, which is the case? What if I want to add her later to a list? So I open her contact card by double tapping it. Okay. I don't even have to go into the edit mode for the contact. I don't have to hit the edit button as if I wanted to change her phone number or something like that. I don't have to do that at all. I just view the contact on the screen. And then near the bottom of the screen, what happens is there's an add to list button. And when I double tap that, it brings up all the lists that I have. And so I can choose to add her to a certain list. As soon as I double tap on the list that I want to add her to, it closes that dialog, it adds her to the list, and it brings me back to Sarah's contact card. You can add a person to multiple lists. You just have to repeat the same steps. Okay. It's not like you can select multiple lists at one time and then add her. You have to hit add list each time. And then you choose which list you want to add her to. And it adds to as many lists as you've done that with, right? And when you add somebody to a list, you're not moving the contact to that list. The original contact card stays where it's always been. It's just that it also now appears on whatever lists you've chosen to add the person to. And so therefore, if you ever want to remove the person from a list, you actually have to go into that particular list. So let's say I'm trying to add Sarah to a TTJ list, and instead I accidentally add her, to some other list related to, let's say, my kid's school, which is not where I meant to have her. So I go into the kid's school list and I see that Sarah is there, and I just use my rotor. I swipe up or down with one finger and I hear the remove option. And that will remove her from a double tap on it. It will remove her from that list. It's not going to delete her actual contact card. It just will remove her from that particular list. So I just wanted to give you that as a little bit more information about the lists. And that's a very important feature there. The other feature that
I have a question about that.
Yeah.
When you add from the contact, add to list, are you adding, because this has happened in quite a few lists that I'm involved with, where you add the phone number and the name doesn't come up for other people, so they have to try and identify what that phone number is. They're like, are you the 802 number? Are you the 714 number? And then put it in themselves. So when you add it from the contact, does it also put your name in there with the number?
Well, it does, but it's still only going to be for you. It's not going to change necessarily the way that shows up for anybody else, because that's just not the way that it works with cell phone. It's not like when you appear. Well, let me try to rephrase it. Let me come at it a different way. Caller ID shows whatever you're registered with the phone company as, not what your contact says. And the way that they can override that is to add you to their contacts themselves. Now, the other benefit that we have that can change that is the ability to share a name and photo through the Messages app, and that will add them to your contacts if you do that, and then it'll come up properly. But yeah, you do
so
have.
There's no real easy way to do it. The other person who's being added to the list, or the recipients of that contact, like within the list, have to identify it.
Right. That's really going to be the best option. And as I say, you can do it by share your name and photo in the message. There's a few different options there, but yeah, essentially somebody's got to kind of take some responsibility for it. And that is a good thing to do. We start talking next week about messages. That's so important, right? Because sometimes we're in these group messages and VoiceOver reads everybody in the group. It would be easy if they just said Sarah, Cliff, Matt, Tim, Bob, Jill, and George, right? But whenever you don't have phone numbers for half of those, then they hear Sarah, Cliff, Matt, +1 827 654 3129, +1 814 6. And so you're hearing all these, and you don't want to do that. You want to eventually get them in your contacts if you're going to communicate regularly with them. So yeah, that's a good point there, Sarah.
Okay, thank you.
All right. All right. So the other thing we have in the lists, rather in the contact card, is the ability to add to favorites. Now, favorites is designed to be a one-touch kind of thing. So when you add somebody to favorites, you have to pick which phone number you add, and you even have to pick whether you're adding them as a phone call or a message or a video call. You can add the same person to favorites multiple times, but they're going to appear as separate entries in your list of favorites, each one being a direct contact, so that all I have to do is double tap on that name in favorites and it either places a call or it sends a message, right? So I don't then have to choose. It's not adding the whole contact card because that really wouldn't save a lot of time, right? If I go to favorites and double tap on a name and then I have to pick iPhone or home or whatever, that's not really saving that much time. I could do the same thing from the contacts list. But by adding an individual's direct choice, it will do that. So what happens when you hit add to favorites is it's not just going to add them, it's going to bring up a menu. You have to choose what you want to add. So if I've opened Sarah's contact card and I want to add her to favorites, it's going to say, okay, what do you want to do? Do you want to add a call, a message, or a video call? If I then pick call, it's going to expand that and it's going to show me, okay, do you want to call Sarah home, iPhone, work? Which one of her phone numbers do you want to add to favorites? Once I've picked that, it puts it in favorites specifically as that. So it would be Sarah's iPhone or her, whatever. And I just double tap and it calls it or sends a message. So that's another thing I just wanted to share with you that I had the opportunity to go over with somebody last night. And I thought I should bring it up today so that you understand how that works. There's benefits to adding people to favorites if you have your settings in such a way that they will override the do not disturb feature. So, they can get through to you no matter what. But there's, a lot of that is to be covered later or just for you to explore, right? Because remember, we're trying to balance teaching apps versus teaching voiceover here. So we try to sprinkle some of both of that in. So hopefully I've given you enough information now about the contacts, because what we'd like you to do today is we'd like you to do a couple of things in our experience lab. So our project with the experience lab today is mainly going to involve contacts, as you might have guessed. And the first thing we want you to do is we want you to make sure that you have your own contact card for yourself set up properly. Remember, we talked about that on Monday, that's kind of the foundation to a lot of the things that we can do with our devices, especially with SIRI. And so we want to make sure we have a proper contact card set up. First name, last name, phone numbers, addresses, if you want to have that, if you want to have your birthday, and if you want to have related names, you can do that as well. But we want to make sure at least that the basic contact card is set up properly. And then we also want to make sure that SIRI knows who you are. So your first step in this project today is going to be to go into either the phone app contacts tab or the separate contacts app and check out your own contact card. Make sure the information is correct and it is proper. First name in the first name field, last name in the last name field, so on and so forth. And then what we're going to want you to do is we're going to want you to ask Siri, who am I? So she can proceed to tell you who you are if in fact that's set up correctly. So under your Siri settings in the settings app, there's an actual option there that says my information or my info. I know I said I wasn't going to give you step by step, but we never covered that. So in fairness, I wanted to tell you it's under your Siri settings. And then I think it says my information. That's where you can tell SIRI who you are manually. Instead of speaking it, you can go in there and select your contact card. But your contact card first has to be set up properly. So again, step number 1 in today's project, make sure your contact card is proper. And number 2, make sure SIRI knows that is your contact card. Okay. Now, if you want to do some of these things verbally, like definitely you have to add and edit your contact in the contacts app or the phone app yourself. But some of the things you can do verbally, as I described on Monday, you could say, for example, John Smith is my dad, or, Melanie Smith is my daughter, or, whatever. You can tell her those things and she'll add those related names for you. You can also use the nickname feature through SIRI. If you don't want to type it in the contact, you summon her and say, call me boss, and then from now on, that's what she'll call you when she's talking to you. So you can do some of those things that way. And I'd like you to take some time during this experience lab and play with SIRI, even if it's not related to contacts. Just try a few things with her if you have some extra time. But the other thing I really do want you to do is to create a new contact from scratch. And I don't care who it is, right? You can put anybody in there that you want. If you don't have anybody that put in your favorite local restaurant if you know their phone number, or make it up. Just invent it. Remember I did test subject the other day, first name test, last name subject. And then I just made up a phone number. You could make up an email address. If you can't think of one, just test@test.com. It doesn't matter. We're not actually going to use it. But if you actually do know a contact you want to add, then by all means, keep it relevant and add a real one. If not, just add one for fun and just try it to practice these steps.
Email all doesn't matter because it doesn't matter what your email address is. But message all, does that mean that they all in the list, in your family list or whatever list it is, do they all have to be an iPhone or iPad or whatever?
So
or iMac, whatever?
I'm going to make some assumptions here because I've not tried it. Okay. And I don't like the old adage about assuming, because I don't like to use profanity. So I change it and I say, when you make speculations, you make a spec out of you and some guy named Lation. But I actually can't take credit for that either. I saw that in a TV show. But anyhow, I digress. I would suspect that when you say message all, it actually is probably going to create a text message group chat as if you had done that yourself. If that is the case, as you know, it doesn't have to be all iMessage. It can be a combination, but it's going to limit, if they're not all Apple users, the features that are available to that group chat.
What'll happen is if you message that list, because there's a message option, of course, in there when it'll say less. Anyways, long story short, it'll send whether it's an iPhone or Sarah's favorite platform, the Android, because she knows she has one that she uses on the weekend. But but no matter who, it's gonna take their mobile number. However, that's why it's important to have it labeled the correct way. Their mobile or their iPhone number, and it's gonna send a message to them in that group. Well, now if it's an all iPhone, great. But if it's not, then it'll still send it. It'll just come up as a SMS with or
and Cliff, when you do that, then does it end up the same result as if you had created the message group in the Messages app? It actually creates a group in there for you then.
Yes, it does. Okay. Yes, it does. Yep.
But you won't be able to name the group if they're not all iPhone.
Nope. If they're not all Apple users, you can't name them.
Right.
Yeah, darn
it. I doubt very seriously that Apple will ever change that feature. And I hope they don't either.
Everybody have a great rest of your week and a great weekend. And we'll see you back on Monday. Remember, Saturdays with Stir It Up is also available. And we do a re-stream, a re-air of this week's classes on Saturday as well. So take care, everybody.
Thanks for joining today's session. Didn't get your question answered? Have an additional comment or feedback? Email us info@ttjtech.biz or info@stiritup.com. And remember, stir is spelled with a U. That's STURITUP.com. Or check out our websites for additional resources. That's ttjtech.biz or stiritup.com. And remember, subscribe to the newsletter when you're there. That way, you don't miss out on any upcoming announcements or events. Thanks for joining us. God bless, and see you next time.